It's my pleasure to introduce the chair, Vartan Djihanian, with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He heads up the Western region for Congressional and Public Affairs division. He's worked with the Chamber for quite a long time and has been very helpful, not only to our chamber, but to chambers around Arizona. And we'll be talking about the CARE Act and some of the most recent updates, and then field your questions. So Vartan, thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Mark and Brittany, and everybody at the Scottsdale Chamber for putting this together. I know we're going through a very, very difficult time right now for small businesses, but really appreciate the leadership that Mark has provided for the Scottsdale area. The Scottsdale Chamber is a great friend of the U.S. Chamber. You're a wonderful partner. Whenever we send letters to Congress on issues that go anywhere from reopening the government to trade and a whole host of issues. But right now we're in a very unique situation with this coronavirus. But fortunately, on the federal level, there have been some positive steps that have been taken over the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to be talking about those. Most importantly, Congress has passed a number of coronavirus stimulus package bills, which would provide direct relief for small businesses. And the one I'm going to be particularly talking about is the CARES Act, which the president signed a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago this Friday, which included $2.2 trillion in relief for businesses of every size, whether they're small, medium, or large businesses, as well as for almost every industry that's out there. So included in that, there was what they're calling the Paycheck Protection Provision, which is a $350 billion program, which provides loans that could turn into grants for small businesses. So I'm going to talk about that. I'll be sharing a screen with you right now. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. And we talked about this before. If you have any questions, feel free to hold them till the end, and you can also reply in the chat section, and Mark and Brittany will be helping me go through those. So I'm going to start sharing my screen right now. All right. So I'll go through an overview first, and I'm going to talk about how the CARES Act will affect individuals as well as small businesses, but I'm also going to very briefly go over the larger businesses, because when I do these calls, most of the businesses that I deal with are under 500 employees. If there are employers on this line who are larger than that, feel free to reach out to Mark and he'll reach out to me. But I'm not going to spend too much time on the really big corporations, because that's not going to be a good use of everybody's time. So the package, as I mentioned, is a $2 trillion bill, and it is phase 3 of the so far 3 bills that have been passed to directly address the coronavirus issue. Although it was a $2 trillion package, there's the ability for them to leverage that money to go into $4 trillion in support for businesses of all sizes. As part of this, before I go into, I'll do the overview now. This includes payments to individual taxpayers. So in addition to everything this bill would do for businesses, there's also relief for individual taxpayers. Almost every single taxpayer in America would receive $1,200 for an individual and $2,400 for a joint filing couple, as well as $500 in additional stimulus money for every child. Now, this is it's an advance on a tax rebate. So typically when you file your taxes at the end of the year, if there's a rebate to be had, they would provide that to you at the end of the year. But in this case, they're going to advance you the tax rebate in the amount that is listed over here. And that amount that you would receive would begin phasing out at $75,000 per person, and that goes up to $100,000. So if you make $75,000, you would essentially get the check for the whole amount of the $1,200. If you made like 80, 90, 95,000, it begins to phase out. So you'd receive a smaller check, and that would apply for $150,000 for a couple, or about about $200,000 for a couple. The support would stop. So if you make over $200,000 as a couple, you would not get any check. The CARES Act also has a provision to expand unemployment. So it would eliminate some of the restrictions on eligibility. It would also eliminate the waiting period. Sometimes they have you wait a little bit before you can file for unemployment. In this case, they're taking that away. You, on top of the state unemployment benefits that you would receive, you would also get $600 on top of that through July 31st from the federal level. The eligibility would end when the individual can return to work. In other words, if you're laid off, as soon as your boss calls you back, you would have to return to work. You can't say, no, you know what, I'd rather stay on the unemployment. When the state gives the okay for, and the public health officials give the okay for your business to resume activities, the workers would have to return, and their unemployment benefits would end. And then again, these benefits, the $600 on top of the state unemployment pay would be administered through the state unemployment offices. So some provisions that apply to all employers are tax changes, an employee retention tax credit. For the larger employers, there'd be loans, loan guarantees, and Federal Reserve credit facilities. As I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I will be talking a lot about how this is going to impact small businesses, the self-employed, independent contractors, and nonprofits. That would include the Paycheck Protection Program, the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loans. They're also called EIDL loans. I'll refer to them as EIDL loans throughout the presentation. And then paid sick and FMLA leave. So for all employers, some of the tax changes that have come through the CARES Act would include a delay of payment of the employer payroll taxes like Social Security between now and the 1st of January 2021. So in that situation, you would have 50% of the taxes due on December 31st, 2021. The other half would be due on December 31st, 2022. Now, if you took advantage of this payroll tax forbearance, you would not be able to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'll talk about soon. So you'd have to pick which of these programs that you'd want to participate in. There will also be additional tax changes for net operating losses for 2018, 2019, and 2020. You can carry those back for 5 years, and that would be extended to pass-throughs and sole proprietors. You can accelerate the recovery of AMT credits, and you would also be able to participate in the qualified improvement property fix. You would also, all employers would also be able to participate in the employer retention credit, but again, this would not apply if you participate in the Paycheck Protection Program loan. The employee retention credit would be for employers who are fully or partially shut down or with 50% drop in gross receipts in a quarter compared to the prior year. You would get a refundable tax credit for 50% of the wages, including employer health plan expenses paid by the employer up to $10,000 per employee. The employers with more than 100 employees, they can apply this to employees not providing services. For employers with 100 or less employees, it would apply to all employees paid during the eligible period. Again, this would not be, you would not be eligible if you did the PPP program. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the mid-sized and larger corporations. Now, the centerpiece of the CARES Act for small businesses has been the Paycheck Protection Program. A lot of people have said this is the most favorable program for small businesses, but you would really have to take a look at your individual situation to see which of these many programs works best for you. The Paycheck Protection Program is $350 billion in loans for small businesses, and that would be defined by the SBA generally as being 500 employees or less. It would also apply to 501c3s, self-employed, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. This is new because typically SBA loans don't apply to sole proprietors and independent contractors and folks who are self-employed. But in this case, the federal government has said that we're in such a dire situation that they really want to expand this to as many people as possible. The way you would calculate your loan amount would be as follows. So you would take your average monthly payroll from last year, you go back 12 months, look at how much you paid in payroll expenses. You include healthcare and retirement in that. You take that for the average for a month, and then you multiply that by 2.5. So that average for a month times 2.5 would be the total amount of the loan that you would be eligible for. Then once you figure that out, you would be able to spend that money for the payroll and some expenses for the next 2 months. So you take the amount for 2.5 months, but the money will be used for 2 months going forward. And the reason why they've given you that extra half-month bump is because in addition to payroll, if you use that money for expenses like rent, or if you own property on the interest on the mortgage, and for utilities, those would also be included in what you'd be able to use this loan for. But most importantly, if you used all of that money for the specific areas that I mentioned, payroll, rent, interest on mortgage, and utilities, all of those expenses would be forgiven at the end of the loan period. Now, if you reduced your workforce, the amount of loan forgiveness would also be proportionally reduced. If you reduce the employer wages by more than 25%, you would proportionally get less forgiveness on that. However, if you were to participate in this program and then ramp back up, if you brought all those full-time employees back, you brought their pay back, then you would be able to get the full loan forgiveness. The point of this is, because people ask me, are you telling me that the federal government would pay me to pay my workers even if they're not coming into work? And the answer to that is yes. The point of this is for employees to stay connected to their employers. The federal government wants to keep both the small businesses and their employees, they want to keep them as whole as possible during this period. They want their insurance to continue to be connected, and they want all these businesses to be able to hit the ground running once the public health officials tell us that it's time to reopen business. So this is a great program. You would be able to apply for it at banks. And so originally they said you can apply for this at banks that are traditional SBA lenders. They call them 7A lenders. However, since it's become such a priority, the federal government has expanded it. So you don't only need to go to traditional SBA lenders. You can go to almost any FDIC insured bank, and they should be able to help you with this loan. Now, because the federal government is, after all, a government, and this is a brand new program, from what I understand, this program, you were able to start applying for the loans a few days ago. So because it's so new, the administration hasn't gone off perfectly on this. So some banks have been telling customers that if you're not an existing credit holder at our bank, we're not going to lend you the money. I know Wells Fargo had a cap because some of the problems that they were involved with last year, they were capped at $10 billion. They can't provide loans for more than $10 billion. So they've kind of run out of that $10 billion. So the burden is really on small businesses right now to find community banks or even national banks that are able to process your loan application. As I said, this is a $350 billion program. That should be enough money to cover the payroll for small businesses for 6 weeks, every small business in America. But because this program has been so popular, this week it looks like Congress is going to take action to approve an additional $250 billion. So from everything we're seeing, there should be enough money for all the small businesses in America to be able to participate in this for the given period of time. But it's just going to be a matter of doing some legwork to go and identify the banks that are participating and that can process your paperwork. This theoretically, all banks should be able to do it, but because it's a brand new program, it's difficult to administer. The other reason why banks should do this is because they're highly incentivized to do it. Typically for SBA loans, the federal government will back them 75%. But in this situation, the federal government has said they will have the back of the banks for 100% worth of the loan amount. So there's really not a lot of downside for banks to participate in this. I'm going to move on from this, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you'll have. You can find more information about the Paycheck Protection Program at uschamber.com/SB loans, as you can see on the screen, uschamber.com/SB loans. We've put together a really good guide that will walk you through the eligibility requirements. Of course, not everybody can apply for this. Your business has to have been in existence before February 15th, before anybody knew what coronavirus was. You also have to somehow show that your business was injured. You'll have to make a personal attestation that your business was injured by coronavirus. And then there are some other eligibility requirements, but really they've tried to keep this as wide as possible. You can find more information in a really simple, easy to use guide at uschamber.com/SB loans. So in addition to the Paycheck Protection Program, there's another loan program, which is the EIDL loans, the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loans. And these are more like actual loans. They're loans that the SBA typically gives out to small businesses that have been injured by some kind of natural disaster. If you think like a tornado or a hurricane or an earthquake. And these loans are up to $2 million, and you can get them for a 30-year term at 3.75% interest. They are going to defer the payments, and the loans would be just based on credit scores. No tax returns would be required, and up to $200,000 without a personal guarantee. Now, the interesting thing about this loan is that when you apply for it, if you make a personal attestation that you've had significant injuries to your business, you can ask for an emergency $10,000 loan, which would be converted to a grant. So when you're applying for this EIDL loan, you can go through and there should be a checkbox that says, would you be interested in an immediate $10,000 grant? If you need that money right away, you can click yes, and that would be a $10,000 grant for your business, which would be a grant regardless of if you're approved for the larger loan. So if you apply for it and then they deny your loan, you would still get the $10,000 grant. If you apply for the loan and you get approved for it, you would still get the $10,000. So what's the downside for this? You could use it with the Paycheck Protection Program, but you cannot double dip. So if you get this emergency disaster loan and you can't use that money for payroll and then go to the Payroll Protection Program and also get that loan and use it for payroll. And the other point is, if you do apply for both the EIDL grant and the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, if you get that $10,000 grant, it would count against your forgiveness for the PPP loan that you got. So let's say you got $100,000 for the Payroll Protection Program, and then you accepted this $10,000 grant. When it came to the forgiveness of the PPP program, you would only be forgiven for $90,000, not the full $100,000, because you already received that emergency grant. And in this case, with the EIDL program, with the EIDL loan, you would not apply through a bank. You would apply directly through SBA.gov, which is the SBA's website, SBA.gov. In addition to the loan programs, there's paid sick leave from the previous phase of this bill. I know most of my presentation is about phase 3, but in phase 2, it addressed paid sick leave, which said that it mandated employers with less than 500 employees to provide 10 days of paid sick leave if the leave is related to COVID-19. The good news about this is usually when Washington passes a mandate, it's an unfunded mandate, but in this case, it's a funded mandate because the federal government would reimburse you for the leave. The leave is paid at regular rate with a maximum of $511 per day if taking care of yourself, but it's paid at 2/3 rate with a maximum of $200 if you're caring for a family member. Like I said, it would be reimbursed by the federal government. and businesses with less than 50 employees may be exempt from this if the closure would threaten the viability of the business. And that paid sick leave is not available if an employee can telework. From phase 2 of the bill, there's also a provision about FMLA leave. Employers with less than 500 employees are required to provide up to 10 weeks of paid FMLA leave if an employee needs to take care of a child due to school or childcare closure caused by COVID. The leave is paid at 2/3 regular pay at a maximum of $200 per day and $10,000 in the aggregate. Again, this would be in addition to the leave that the employer would normally provide. And again, if you are able to telework, this would not apply to you. You can find more information about all these programs at uschamber.com and also at uschamber.com/co. And with that, I know I provided a lot of information, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, at this point, we'll open up for questions. Thank you, Vartan. A lot of information, very useful information. And what I'd ask again, I know we were choppy audio at the beginning. Just as a reminder, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a hand signal to raise your hand, and Brittany Bolton from the Chamber team will call on you and bring you into the conversation. So let's go ahead and open up for conversations and questions. Thank you.
Hi, Rob. Did you still have your hand raised? Did you have a question? Okay. How about you, Sharon?
Sorry about that. I was trying to get unmuted. I do not have a question. I was just at the beginning. I was letting Mark know we were having a hard time hearing him.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Sharon, are you there?
Hello?
Hey,
Can you hear me?
Yep.
we can.
Oh, thank you. I sent a couple of questions in on the chat. Do I need to read those? How do we do this?
Yeah, would you just read it?
Okay, I have several part-time employees. So when it comes time to talk about reduced FTE,
I'm sorry, you're breaking out. I'm going to see if I can find your question in the chat.
Sharon, I think I see your question. I see, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, can you read the question, Brittany?
Yes. I applied for the EIDL before they changed the requirements. Then I applied again. Then I applied for the 10,000 loan. I have not heard from anyone. Is there any way I can check the status?
Is she still on the line?
She is.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Which bank did you apply for? Which bank did you apply at for the EIDL loan?
No, the PPP, I applied through Bank of America.
Okay.
The EIDL loan, I went to the SBA website, and it was before they changed their
Application.
application procedure. And so I got sent way through the application, and then they changed it. So then I did it again. And then I heard about the new form with the $10,000 checkbox. So,
When did you apply for the EIDL loan? I'm not hearing anything.
can you hear me? Well,
No.
I started late March. Like I said, I did it 3 times.
When is the last time you applied for it?
Sorry, I don't know if it's my internet. They enacted the $10,000 loan checkbox.
Yeah, when was that? Just so in the past few days? I can't hear you, but let me see if I can answer.
No.
So with the EIDL loan, they were supposed to get back to you. SBA was supposed to get back to you within 3 days. I know in practice, they haven't been able to get back to everybody in that amount of time. I would urge you to number one, I know everyone's in a dire position right now, but if you can be as patient as you can, I know that's very difficult to do right now. But the other thing I would say is call your local SBA office and ask them if they received it, ask them if they processed it. On that application, you should have been able to leave your bank account information. So also check your bank account to see if they've transferred the money in. But for the SBA loan, I would say for the SBA EIDL loan, I'd say contact the SBA, your local SBA office, to just make sure that they received it and they processed it. In terms of the EIDL loan, in terms of the PPP loan, obviously that's through the bank. So I would also follow up with the bank. I think from what I've been hearing, the folks who have been most successful with this have been the ones that have been the squeaky wheels and have followed up with the banks and with the SBA. I do think ultimately everybody is going to get their funding. I know the importance of getting it right now versus next week or in 2 weeks from now. So I would urge you to just be the squeaky wheel so that you can get that as soon as possible. Ultimately, there's enough money in there for everyone, but if you want it sooner rather than later, please be on top of the SBA and also be on top of your bank.
It looks like there is also a question on, she has several part-time employees. How does she figure out if I have reduced FTEs or not?
You would compare it to the amount that you had last year. I think they're going to go back 12 months and just see if the numbers add up in comparison to what you have right now. So essentially with part-time employees, you should be doing about the same number of hours and at the same wage.
Okay. And from Walt, he's wondering how we get the feds to lift the limit on Wells Fargo.
We're working on it at the U.S. Chamber. I would urge you to contact your member of Congress. Most people in that area should have Congressman Schweikert, so you can contact Congressman Schweikert's office about this. And also, and if you don't, if you can't get it through Wells Fargo, I wouldn't just stop there, because that might be a process to get them to lift the cap. I would just go to another community bank. I would burn up those phone lines until I can find a bank that would process the PPP application.
Perfect. Another question is, given the seasonality of the hospitality business and the lack of travel that will return by June, are there any other resources, or has this been discussed that the return of employees by June may be impossible?
Yeah, they've done a number of things for the hospitality industry. For example, I know a lot of hotels are part of chains. And so, if you own a Holiday Inn Express franchise or a Hilton franchise, typically you wouldn't be able to apply for these loans, because if you add up all of the Holiday Inn employees, that would be more than 500. So they've said that, okay, you can have, so they'll judge each business based on the property. So if you have 200 employees that work at your hotel, you would be eligible. I think going forward though, they're talking about doing a phase 4 for additional help. I think in that situation, they're gonna look at a state by state or county by county basis. And for the businesses, for the industries that are lagging behind, because air travel is gonna still be slow for a while. Movie theaters are going to be slow. So I think they're going to look at those specific industries that are having particular trouble and those areas that are having particular trouble, and getting more kind of laser focused aid on those industries. So I would pay attention to that, and I'd stay in touch with your member of Congress about that if your industry is particularly hit hard.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
Vartan, I have a question. If you could maybe address specifically how nonprofits, again, can be approaching some of this relief. Specifically, we've been getting a number from nonprofits.
Yeah, so 501c3 nonprofits will be able to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program. Other types of 501 organizations like 501c6s, unfortunately at this point are not eligible. We're working on fixing that down the road. But if you have a 501c3, you would essentially be able to operate like any other small business in approaching how you would get the Paycheck Protection Program loan. You can go directly to your bank and start the application process. If you are a 501c6, I would get my application in for the EIDL loan as quickly as possible, because for the time being, that's going to be the only support that 501c6s get. But keep in mind, if in the future you end up getting a Paycheck Protection Program loan, that $10,000 grant would count against any forgiveness that you get for the PPP program. But they do, fortunately, they do work together, and it's not like you don't have to pick which program you can get. And I will say that 501c9 organizations, veterans organizations, are eligible also for the PPP program.
Thank you. It looks like we do have a question from Mark.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So my question is, I did apply and I thought it went like straight to the national SBA. You're saying that it went to the local SBA office first and then they did some work and they sent it on. Is that correct?
No, it probably did go national, but the local SBA might be able to access their database to make sure that everything went through.
Oh, okay. And the other nice thing is you do get a reference number.
Yep.
So that's what you go by. So, okay. Well, thank you.
Mark, when did you apply? When did you apply for your
About
loan?
3 days ago. And
Okay.
the gentleman from the SBA, who's a volunteer, he said, well, online it says that it'll take about a week, but he said in reality, it's about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So that was just feedback from him.
Okay. Good to know.
And thank you again. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Vartan, I'd also ask, I know there's a number of our members and folks that have chimed in about questions for assistance, and I know the U.S. Chamber is more than happy to help out as best as possible. Also, I know Rob Millar's on the line, and the City of Scottsdale has opened up a small business assistance center to also help out and ask questions and help businesses, as well as several of we have a number of resources. I know Fenimore Craig is offering services to businesses, and so I think if there's some specific questions, there are a number of resources between Vartan and the City of Scottsdale, folks like Fenimore Craig and others that are willing to help out as they can.
Yep, absolutely. The SBA offices are available. They have SBDC offices sometimes in areas. Those can be helpful. I think everybody understands how important this situation is and how fragile this situation is with small businesses. It's kind of all hands on deck. So, so please use all the resources that are available right now to help you in this situation.
So we'll check and see if there are any more questions from the participants for Vartan. And Rob Millar, do you have any updates you'd like to provide from Economic Development Office for Scottsdale?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. No, thank you very much for putting this together. And as you mentioned, we have implemented yesterday a small business assistance center, and working very closely with the SBA and the assistance resources locally. And if there's anything we can do, please reach out to us. All of this information is on our scottsdaleaz.gov and our choosescottsdale.com. You can find information how we connect there. So thank you very much. I do have one question. There was some things that I heard driving in this morning on the radio, that there were various people calling into the show listening to, saying that the funds for these various initiatives were at or near being completely utilized. I know you mentioned that there was enough for all businesses, majority of businesses in the country, but is there another relief fund that is being considered? I know they're talking about another maybe $1 trillion relief act. Do you have any information on that as far as what's available and what might be coming down as additional funding?
Yeah, so the amount that I said was they have enough funding to provide the payrolls for 6 weeks for all small businesses in America. Of course, for this program, it's 2.5. You're getting the average payroll for 2.5 months. So it doesn't cover every, it doesn't cover every small business for the full 2.5 months. So because of that, they will be going back to Congress, I think this week, maybe tomorrow, to get $250 billion in addition to what they have for the PPP program to inject some more money in this. From everything I'm hearing, money is not going to be an issue in this because Congress is prepared to help as many small businesses as they can. It's just a matter right now of finding the banks that are properly prepared to be able to process the applications. And time is of the essence for businesses. So that, I think that's becoming the challenge because I hear about businesses that are going under because they don't have enough money for today. So if I were a small business, I would spend day and night trying to find a bank that will process my application. You might have to be creative. There are some people who are doing even online banks that are processing these. Just make sure that the bank that you're going to is FDIC insured and it's a total legitimate bank. You are going to be giving a lot of sensitive information. So just make sure that it's that it's a valid bank that you're applying to. But for the small businesses who are not working right now, I would just spend all my time on this application or the EIDL application, whatever applies best to your situation.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark.
So I do have a little follow-up question there just to clear up confusion. So I went online and did it. I didn't go to a bank directly. I went online to do it there, and then I put my banking information in. Is that enough?
Is that for the EIDL loan or the PPP?
The $10,000 grant loan, that one.
Yeah, that's SBA. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
It should be online.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, any more questions for Vartan from the U.S. Chamber? And Vartan, you have your contact information for more information.
Yep. I don't know if my email is on here, but Mark, you have that. If anyone has any follow-up questions, please send them to Mark. I can give it to you now, but you probably won't be able to spell it. It's pretty convoluted. So I'll give it to Mark, and Mark has it already. So.
All right. Well, we'll go around. If there's another round, if there's any other questions or comments, obviously we're working out some of the sound challenges, but we're getting better at it, and we'll continue the webinar series again. We ask that participants pay attention to the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce website, scottsdalechamber.com, and take a look at the upcoming events and activities. We're shifting all the programming to a digital format. I want to thank all of our participants, and Vartan, thank you. We'll keep you on tap to come back and give us an update as things move along. Hopefully this in a better direction sooner than later. So I want to thank all of the participants. Being Holy Week, best to all and best wishes during Passover and Easter weekend coming up. So best to all for that, and ask everyone to please remember to adhere to the guidelines for social distancing. Even though we're not physically able to be together, it doesn't mean we can't be connected. And that's where organizations like the Chambers of Commerce, the Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce come in. And this is where we do our best work. So please stay connected. Let us know if you have any questions, and please check our website again for updates. Anything else, Vartan, before we wrap up?
That's it. Thank you so much. And hang in there to all the small businesses out there. You guys are such an important part of all of our communities that we're very grateful for all you're doing. I hope these programs will be able to help you. And thank you, Mark, for everything you're doing at the Scottsdale Chamber and your entire team.
Thank you. And thanks for what you're doing and And thanks for keeping us updated on a pretty much daily basis. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
With that, if there's no more questions, again, please stay safe, stay connected. Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce is here to help. Thank you for your engagement, and we will be in touch here in the next few days. Thank you.